Hello, everyone. This is Graham O'Neill with Prosperity Now, and we're here for the Prosperity Summit Encore series. Today we have Maximizing Community Impact, Scaling VITA Services with Self-Preparation. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about this one. We're going to wait just a minute or two for let everybody come in. We know it's takes some time to bounce between meetings these days, so we're going to give everybody about 30, 40 seconds, let them come in, and we'll move on to the webinar itself. All right. Hello again, everyone. Looks like we have a good number of people here, so we're going to get started. Again, my name is Graham O'Neill. I am the tax policy strategist here at Prosperity Now, and you're here today for our Prosperity Summit Encore series, which is and today's topic is maximizing community impact, scaling VITA services with self-preparation. You might have heard of it as FSA. Can we go to the next slide, please? So just to let everyone know, probably know this already, but the Prosperity Summit Encore is a series where we are covering a wide range of topics, including present-day best practices, powerful lessons, intentional tools, and change makers like you. And each installment of the series is designed to get you pumped up for the 2024 Prosperity Summit in Washington, D.C., which we'll give you a little bit more information about at the end of the broadcast. So just a little housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be mailed to registrants and available online within 1 week of the conclusion of the webinar. Please make sure that you are muted. We've done that for you, but if for some reason you become unmuted, please put yourself back into mute just so we can make sure that everyone can hear the presentation. If you're having trouble dialing in, you can listen through your computer with speakers or headphones. To ask a question or share a thought anytime by typing into the text box on the right of your screen by the GoToWebinar control panel. You'll see we have on the screen now where you can actually ask the questions. And you can tell where you're muted as well if you look at the box right up there. And if you experience any technical issues, you can email gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org, which you're monitoring at all times during this to help anyone out who's having a problem. All right, next slide. So to get the most out of today's call, please make sure that you are joining us from a quiet space, not just to keep the outside noise in, but just so you can listen and focus in on what the content is. Feel free to grab a coffee or a snack and settle in. If you have to go get one, go ahead. Make sure to submit your questions and comments as you listen. There's that question box we told you about. It's there for you to ask those questions, and we want to hear from you. We don't want to hear just from our guests. We want to hear from our community. That's what TON and Prosperity Now is all about. And then, make sure what you hear today, you take away with you and apply in the work that you're doing. I think we all just wrapped up a good tax season. I think a tax season that in many ways was better than the last three, to say the least. But there's always things we can improve on. There's always things we can bring to our clients better than we did the year before. So please take what you hear today and bring it out to the field. And speaking of the field, two of the most amazing VITA people that I know are today's speakers. Well, first, I'm again, I'm Graham O'Neill. I'm with Prosperity Now, our Taxpayer Opportunity Network and our network building team, and I help direct our all of our tax work here. I'm joined today by Katie Schultz, Training and Learning Manager with Prepare and Prosper, and Brendan Steve, Manager, Community Impact and Economic Mobility with United Way Worldwide. Yeah, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brendan.
Hey, great. Thanks, Graham. Appreciate the introduction. As mentioned, folks, I'm Brendan Stuvey with United Way Worldwide. I help run our My Free Taxes VITA program. Before we move to the next slide, I want to pause. Katie, did you want to give a brief additional intro for yourself now, or did you want to save that for the slide later?
I think I'll just jump in right now and say, hello, folks. I'm super happy to be here. And I work at Prepare and Prosper, which is a nonprofit organization in St. Paul, Minnesota. VITA services are one thing we do, but we really focus on broader financial capability with coaching and accessible financial products. But I work really closely with our facilitated self-assistance program, and I'm super excited to be joining this call and working with Brendan to share some information about what a neat added capacity that can be for your VITA program.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Katie, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We're going to get started with 2 poll questions. The first is on the next slide. And it's, who are you? Are you a VITA TCE practitioner? Are you an advocate or a funder? Or are you just here because you're VITA curious? For me, I predominantly help run a VITA program, so I'm mainly a practitioner, although I do also dabble in the advocate and funder space. We'll give you a few moments to complete your submissions. All right, good. We got a heavy focus on practitioners today, but a good mix overall. We're glad each and every one of you is here today. Let's move on to our second poll question. Which is, what percent of VITA TCE eligible people do you think access these programs each year? Is it 3%, 12%, 25%, or 66%? We'll give you a few moments to input your answer. It's not graded, don't worry. This is just to help us level set our expectations, see where we're all starting from.
Brendan, I'm super excited to see what people answer, especially since we've got so many VITA practitioners in the room today. We'll see what we have coming in.
Excellent. Yeah, me too. We actually have a good mix of answers here today. I love the optimism. I think what's true today is not going to be what's true next year and the year after. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that the correct answer is 3%. But I love everyone that was putting in a higher number, because that's where we're going. That's where we're pushing towards. While we know that VITA and TCE programs provide critical services to 2 to 3 million people a year, that represents just 3% of the 100 million people that are eligible. We know this isn't due to a lack of demand, as virtually every site is operating at capacity. One thing that does have a limiting effect is that traditional VITA and TCE services are incredibly heavy in use of volunteer time. Returns that are prepared on behalf of filers via VITA and TCE services require an average of 1 to 2 hours of volunteer time per return. That's fantastic, high quality services, high touch services, but it means that if we're going to scale the number of people we reach, we have to scale the number of highly dedicated, highly trained volunteers alongside that. Additionally, we as a network, VITA TCE, hit a high in 2015, but we've come down every year since then. I do understand this past year, we've reversed that trend. We bounced back up a little bit, which is good. We're digging out of the lows of COVID, but we don't have any indication yet that we're on a path to reach pre-COVID levels. Even if we do get back to the high point of 2015, the VITA TCE network will produce 3.8 million returns, which again, fantastic amount of impact. That's a huge number of people. However, it's also less than 4% of those who are eligible. So one of the core questions that we're seeking to answer here is, so how then do we reach more people with high quality, trusted, free tax filing services? Next slide, please. Well, the IRS offers IRS Free File, but unfortunately this program is significantly underused. It reaches just about 2% of those who are eligible, and the program is fraught with well-documented issues wherein low and moderate income filers try to access a free file version of the product, but actually end up accessing the paid commercial version of that product instead. Or they may actually access the free file product successfully, but then still have to pay when using that product to file their state return. In both instances, many LMI filers end up paying to file when trying to access the IRS Free File program. And anytime that happens, when someone's trust is sort of eroded by that process, it makes it more difficult for that program to be seen as the solution that can meet people at scale. Next slide. We believe that a modern, scalable VITA TCE program model is needed to ensure that everyone who wants and is eligible for free tax assistance can access these services, sort of the guiding principle shaping our conversation today. Next slide. Oh, let's go back. Hopefully no one read everything on the slide, because we do have another poll question, which hopefully everyone's going to get right now, which is great. Actually, the same information was in the registration page. So if you read the registration page, you know the answer to this one too. What percent of US households currently file their taxes using online software? Is it 17%, 31%, 45%, or 61%? We included a hint in here for you math heads too. One of these numbers is not like the other. It's the only non-prime number. That's the right answer. So tax folks, maybe a bunch of math heads in the room, wanted to do something tricky for you all. Let's go to the results. Nice. We have a good chunk of people putting in the correct answer of 45%. But as you can tell, there's a significant group amongst us, more than half, who are not quite sure of the percentage. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation today. Let's go to the next slide. So 45%, or nearly half, of US households regularly use online software to file their taxes. This comes straight from IRS Data Book public information. However, only 5% of VITA filers complete their own returns using online software, using a method that the IRS calls Facilitated Self-Assistance VITA, or FSA VITA. We'll dive deeper into the definition of what FSA VITA is in just a moment, but really the point we want to underscore here is that we believe with suitable investment and broad adoption across the entirety of the VITA and TCE network, that FSA VITA can double the impact of VITA and TCE to serve 2+ million more low and moderate income Americans. Because if half of US households already file their taxes using online software, there's no reason to believe that the VITA TCE population should be any different. So if we all invest what we can in helping promote FSA VITA, then that's additive, adding a new population that we're able to serve through VITA and TCE. I'm going to pass it over to Katie now, who on the next slide will start sharing a bit more about VITA service styles and FSA VITA. Katie?
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, I think you did a great job kind of like laying out the background and landscape that we're looking at. And I also think that for those of you that are falling in that VITA curious category, or maybe some of our funders that are joining us today, we threw out a lot of acronyms that might not be exact, or a lot of terminology that's related to VITA that might not sit home. So we want to make sure that we define some of this background. So VITA and TCE provide low to moderate income filers with access to in-person services and also to remote options for pre-tax preparation. And there's 3 main buckets that all of this falls into. Almost all of us VITA providers are engaged in some way, shape, or form with traditional VITA, which is doing face-to-face services. Our filers are actually coming to a physical location, and we are working through a tax return with them physically present with us. Virtual VITA really saw a huge uptick as we were working through the worst of our pandemic environments in the last couple of years. And this has put together a system where people can submit documents or pass documents to us, and then the filer is not physically present while we are working through their tax preparation and review process. So traditional VITA, all in person, virtual VITA, volunteers are still preparing that tax return, but the taxpayer is not physically present during that whole process. And then we have facilitated self-assistance, or FSA VITA. And this is actually allowing the filer to prepare their own taxes. So going through the process of using an online software, which, as Brendan said, a lot of people already do. And VITA volunteers are present when the filer needs you. So if somebody needs assistance, a VITA volunteer jumps in and offers that support. We might offer that support in person. Somebody might come to a physical location to prepare their own tax return, or they might give us a call, send us an email, or go through a chat service so that we can provide that assistance to someone. And we're going to move to the next slide to cover some of the different ways that we break down FSA. So we've got our traditional VITA, our virtual VITA, and our FSA. And FSA actually breaks into a couple of different categories. We've got our remote facilitated self-assistance, where filers are going to be kind of on their own from wherever they would like to be while they are filing on their own devices. They can ask questions when they need to and have that on-demand support. And then we've got co-located or standalone FSA, which is at a specific location, and there are going to be VITA volunteers there providing in-the-moment support. That might happen at a library, it might happen at your normal VITA site, might happen at a college, somewhere where there's a computer lab, or where people can bring in a computer of their own or a device of their own to work through while physically present with a volunteer. And we are going to, so I think that kind of sets up a lot of the terminology that Brendan and I are just going to be throwing out there as we go through the rest of our sections. And now I want to transition to kind of making this case. Brendan and I are both firm believers that FSA VITA can really expand the capacity of our services. And so we're going to jump to the next slide and start talking about benefits of FSA VITA. And one of the key pieces to this is accessibility. So like Brendan was saying, we're reaching a very small percentage of eligible VITA filers. Part of that is because people want to be doing their own return. And FSA is really available on demand. Anyone who has access to a digital device and an internet connection can jump in and do their own return. And this doesn't have to be their own personal device. This could be done at a library or a college, could be at a community center that has access to internet, could be at your auntie's house. It could be using your cousin's smartphone. It doesn't matter how they get access. This is also a fast option for a lot of filers. The work that Brendan and I have been doing for years, we've seen that people are often completing their tax return in less than an hour. We'll talk more about our individual programs and how we implement that, but I've definitely seen people kind of cruise through that whole process with a simple return and be all finished up and e-filed within an hour. This is also a really accessible option in terms of pulling in low to moderate income tax filers who often get excluded from the VITA process just because of complexity, but they might still be able to and interested in learning to file their own tax return. I'm thinking of people who are self-employed, folks with rental income, and things like that can engage in a self-filing or FSA process, even if they aren't eligible for traditional VITA services. And like we've been kind of hitting home, this idea of filing on your own really syncs up with how people are operating within and outside of the VITA world. So we see more and more people shifting into using this FSA in the VITA world, but we've got almost half of US filers jumping in, so 45% of US households jumping in and filing their own returns using online software. And we see 5% of those VITA filers using FSA. So of the total VITA filers, we got 5% who are using FSA. We expect to see that number growing as more of you adopt this option. Another one of the benefits that I want to cover is on the next slide, and that is covering the efficiency of this VITA model. So when we look at FSA, when it's kind of compared to a traditional VITA, we are going to see our volunteer resources, which are, as Brendan was explaining in kind of our setting the landscape, our VITA resources are limited, right? Our volunteers, we've seen kind of a decline in volunteer support for the VITA program. And so we want to use those volunteer resources to their maximum impact. We want to make sure that we target this volunteer capacity toward folks that really need support. And so what that means to me is not, hey, everybody stop doing traditional VITA. I absolutely do not believe that. But what I look at that is opening up the capacity of our traditional VITA by pairing FSA VITA along with our traditional services or virtual services. And what that might look like from a volunteer standpoint is that we are able to direct our limited resources toward those folks that really need traditional VITA services, but we're also able to expand our services to allow volunteers to assist folks that are filing on their own as needed. And that looks like maybe even using your same volunteer pool, because FSA filers often need really limited assistance. Brendan and I have found that somewhere between 10 and 15% of filers need a little bit of help. A lot of those interactions take less than 15 minutes to help resolve. And people are more likely to need help when they're first getting started in their first year of doing their own taxes. They might need a little more support, but in year 2, they're feeling really good. They might not need to ask any questions unless their situation has changed significantly. And so when we think about that, like a smaller percentage of filers need direct assistance. That direct assistance is often a shorter duration of time because we're looking at maybe 15 minutes per filer that needs help in comparison with at least an hour of volunteer time going into a traditional VITA return. When we think about the decrease in our volunteer efforts that are poured into FSA, we could do 1 million VITA returns in a lot less hours. So we have a little statistic up on the screen here. It says the time required to produce 1 million VITA returns with traditional VITA is 1 million volunteer hours. And with FSA, we estimate that to be 50,000 volunteer hours. So if we're shooting for the sky and getting 1 million returns done, that's kind of what we want to look at. So from there, I've kind of like laid out like some of our case for why we want to be digging into the FSA VITA space. And now I want to transition on the next slide to talking about how we launched Prepare and Prosper's services. So if we want to just flip to the next slide here, this gives an overview of Prepare and Prosper's services. And we launched our do-it-yourself tax preparation program in 2020 when we were in the height of the COVID pandemic and we needed an alternative to our traditional VITA services. We looked at this as a way to expand capacity, give access to people, and alleviate the inherent traditional VITA conflict with COVID, which was we all need to be in a room together, but we weren't supposed to be at that point in time. And this really, we've opted to continue offering the service because it has been a really great way for us to expand our partnerships with businesses and professional networks. We've connected with a lot of unions, a lot of employers that were interested as providing free tax preparation and a connection to Prepare and Prosper as a way for their stakeholder groups to get free tax preparation. And then we also have used this as a way to leverage our existing outreach partnerships to reach new audiences. So we're not telling folks that are not a great fit to come and do their own taxes, but for folks that we're paying for tax preparation, but they qualify to do it for free, we want to steer them into Prepare and Prosper's do-it-yourself tax preparation service so they can get support from certified VITA volunteers. They have somebody on demand to ask questions to, and then we're reaching new audiences within our current outreach partnerships. And this is really a flexible option for people. They can do it in their pajamas from home. All they need is hopefully a computer, but a smartphone works. And we have a picture of our web page that we use to direct filers to our services. It kind of lays out what we have available through Prepare and Prosper, and kind of how we see our filer process running through is that we do a brief screening with everybody. They fill out a little form that kind of like assesses good fit for the program. And then they request the software link from us and get some resources along with that, a guide to help them do data entry and get their account set up, and then some best practices, tips for a successful filing experience. And then people also have the option to attend a virtual training session, which we host in Zoom with breakout rooms so that people can ask questions one-on-one with a volunteer supporter. And then we also let people do on-demand ask for support. So if they want to ask a question, a text question, a software question, they can email us, they can give us a call, or we have a little web form on our website that they can type in their question and get in touch with us that way too. So that's kind of like the broad strokes overview of how Prepare and Prosper has run the do-it-yourself tax preparation program. And now on the next slide, I want to pass it over to Brendan to talk about how My Free Taxes has been operating. So Brendan, over to you.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, so at United Way Worldwide, we operate My Free Taxes. My Free Taxes is an online VITA program where we help people file their federal and state taxes for free while getting the assistance that they need. We're primarily focused on providing what Katie helped define as FSA remote VITA. People filing their own taxes from the convenience of whatever digital device they access, and accessing support on demand when they need it. All of our users are presented with the choice of, do they want to file their own taxes or do they want to have the return prepared for them? 85% of our users choose the option that they want to file their own taxes. Once they choose that option, we screen them for eligibility based on income. The FSA software that the IRS procures for the VITA network has a hard income cap of $73K. So we make sure that they're eligible, meaning they earned less than $73K. That's our only screening question. If they earned less and they're eligible to use the software, then we connect them directly to the FSA filing software from our site to that site landing page. If filers instead prefer to have their return prepared for them, they can choose that option and we'll refer them to local and virtual traditional VITA services using tools like the IRS VITA Site Locator tool or connecting people to their local 211 call center, which is a resource and referral service that folks can call to identify what services are available in their community. We provide assistance to all filers that submit us a question. All of our support specialists are IRS certified. We provide support via phone, email, and live chat. And we have a growing list of searchable FAQs, guides, and how-tos that help people drill down on some of the either more detailed or more common questions that might be better answered in a written or long format. If you want to check us out or get started, just head to myfreetaxes.com and you can see the way that we're operating. We've been operating this way since 2009, but we became an official VITA partner in 2020. When we started, we switched from connecting people to a free version of a commercial software that United Way Worldwide negotiated to using the free version of a commercial software that the IRS VITA program actually procures directly. So that software is a lot more stable in terms of its availability year to year. It's managed by a government contract, and it's fully free. So there's no opportunities for people to suffer upsells, fees, et cetera, that plague a lot of the quote unquote free filing landscape. I'm going to pass it back to Katie, who's going to share how organizations can implement their own FSA VITA initiatives. Katie?
Yeah, so when Brendan and I think through kind of these benefits, and we're making this case for like, hey, you at your organization could do this too. I want to just kind of lay out those pros again for being able to offer VITA at your organization. This is an accessible option for our filers. People can jump in from anywhere with an internet connection and a device. It's efficient for use of our VITA funds, our VITA efforts. The volunteer time allows people to support more filers and maybe even do that, like I said before, in conjunction with a traditional VITA program. We have wide eligibility. There aren't restrictions for what forms people can file. There's some income limits, and our volunteers still have to follow all of our VITA guidelines when we're giving tax advice, but we don't have to worry about forms restrictions in terms of who can file using the software. And it's also just really convenient for filers. They can do that at any point in time, jump in and work on their tax return and get support when they need it. And so when we think about incorporating VITA into your financial capability programming, or if you don't offer VITA already, or incorporating it into your VITA programming that exists at your organization, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can implement your own VITA initiative. So that's really similar to what Prepare and Prosper has done. We have developed resources, put together a system of our own that we operate kind of in-house as I think about it. And then another option is that you can integrate referrals to a partner's FSA VITA initiative. And that would be something that I'll have Brendan talk about in a few minutes, doing some partnership with a larger national organization like My Free Taxes. So first, we're going to talk about implementing your own VITA initiative. So we can jump to the next slide. And when you are thinking about implementing your own VITA initiative, I want you to think about the chart that we have up on the screen. Is going to give us a few different steps. So you're going to identify what FSA model you want to run, design a flow for your customers. How are they going to move through the process? You're going to work with your IRS relationship manager to get this established as part of your VITA programming. You need to choose a software. And this can be a little contentious, so I'll give some general guidance in a second. And then you want to develop resources for your filers and your outreach. And then you need to recruit and train volunteers that can support this model of work at your organization. So kind of jumping back to the top, and this is the flow that Prepare and Prosper followed. So I'll kind of use us as an example and some of these as we go through. When you're identifying your FSA model, you're going to choose, is it going to be remote or is it going to be offered kind of in conjunction with traditional VITA services or with a virtual VITA service at a physical location for you. And Prepare and Prosper chose to do this as a remote option. So we do everything via email, phone, or chat support with our filers, and we found that to be the best fit, especially when we started the program during the height of the pandemic. Although we are looking at, for the next filing season, we're looking at offering some co-located with our traditional VITA services or having standalone services at particular locations like libraries in our local counties. Next thing you're going to think through is designing an FSA flow. How are customers going to get to you? How are they going to find you? And we looked at that through our partnerships. So finding unions that were interested in partnering with us, finding businesses that were willing to pitch that to their employees. And then you also need to think about assistance. How are people going to reach you? And one of the best ways to do that is have a designated email inbox that is just for questions related to this FSA process. People can get in touch with you. You know exactly what those questions are about, and you can have somebody, be it a staff person or a volunteer, monitoring that inbox to get back to people. As you're making these decisions, even if you're just getting FSA curious in this process, include your IRS relationship manager in the discussion. You want that person to be with you the whole way, supporting you the whole way. Let them know your plans, that you're thinking about it. What are you planning to do? And then you'll also need a site identification number or an SIDN to track your FSA work. When you're selecting a software, you will provide that SIDN number so that all of your FSA returns are tracked. So that goes into the next system of choosing a software. The biggest requirement with choosing a software is that you have to choose something that allows for tracking with a site identification number and can be tied back to your VITA work. There isn't a particular requirement for software from IRS spec. And so as a VITA provider, if you find a software company that is a good match for your organization, there isn't any restriction on what software you can choose. And then as you're thinking about like the whole flow of your system, developing resources is going to be a big part of that. You want to be able to have marketing materials, social media content, email newsletters, and things like that that promote this as an option, especially if you also offer traditional VITA services, having something available on site for your folks that are missing documents and etc. Pass them that, hey, you could do it yourself, getting that information out. The other type of materials like broad strokes, other type of materials that your organization might be developing is cheat sheets for filers, guides, Prepare and Prosper every year updates do-it-yourself tax prep guide with best practices and tips that we send out whenever somebody contacts us wanting to use the do-it-yourself tax preparation program. And then recruiting and training volunteers, you're going to want to determine, is this a virtual option for volunteering or an in-person option for volunteering? Is it at particular times, or can volunteers just jump in as they have time to support filers? And depending on the scale of FSA program that you're going to run, this might be something where one volunteer can be all the support that you need. And it also might be something where you want to have a few volunteers who are jumping in and out to assist filers with this process as they go. And at Prepare and Prosper, we have incorporated that so that volunteers that are working with our traditional VITA services are able to work through the process of supporting filers in our do-it-yourself tax prep program. And that has worked really well for all of the volunteers who just cannot get enough. And I think from there, that's kind of like the overall process and flow of what I think it takes to implement your own FSA. And you can dig in more or less to each of these steps. But there's also, it's not a lot of extra lift, but I want to pass it over to Brendan to talk about partnering with an existing FSA provider. So we can move to the next slide, because that might be an even easier way for you to start implementing this at your site.
Great, thanks, Katie. Yeah, if anyone's not ready to implement their own FSA VITA program, you can still help double the impact of VITA and TCE in your community by partnering with an existing FSA provider. Some national options include My Free Taxes, Get Your Refund in recent years, and hopefully there's others coming online soon. You may also instead want to start like a statewide FSA VITA coalition, where all the VITA sites in your state band together and produce, a single FSA VITA service that you all refer to, if you prefer that over a national partner. Whoever you decide to work with, you'll first identify, you'll identify the partner to decide who you want to work with, and then you'll integrate their FSA VITA program in all of your outreach and promotional efforts. This helps filers learn about and choose between both traditional and FSA VITA, so they can choose the option that's right for them. Sometimes we've seen FSA implemented by traditional VITA providers as sort of a pressure release valve for folks who've scheduled an in-person appointment, go to the in-person appointment, see they're running behind and there's a long line, and then a volunteer says, well, here's your computer over here if you want to do it yourself. But that can be successful, but relatively limited so in a limited way, because it requires someone to first be interested in person over virtual or over DIY. They have to then like get dressed and travel and get down there, and they've set their expectation they're receiving one service. So sometimes it's hard to move people at scale from that service to another. So what we recommend is providing the choice up front. And we'll show you some examples of that in a moment, so that filers can choose, do they want traditional in-person or full service VITA, or do they want the FSA VITA experience? You'll then collect data metrics from your FSA partner, which you can use in your IRS VITA grant reporting and other grant reports to measure your impact. For instance, at My Free Taxes, we don't receive an IRS VITA grant. So the only people that are going to be reporting our outcome production to the IRS VITA grant office are our partners who are promoting My Free Taxes, taking the data of the number of returns that we help filers prepare from various geographies across the country and saying, because I partner with My Free Taxes this year and in prior years, I've helped the filers in my community use My Free Taxes to achieve a certain number of return production. I'm going to add that to my report, because frankly, that is impact that you're producing, even in partnership with us. On the next slide, we'll look into a few best practices for FSA implementation, and Katie's going to take the first one.
Yeah, and so and thinking about best practices and understanding that filer fit, it's such an important part of this process. I said this before, and I don't think I can say it enough during this presentation. Brendan and I are both FSA proponents and very excited about the process, but neither one of us think that there's no place for traditional VITA. We want to find people who are a good fit for FSA to work through this process. And what we're looking for is people who are generally comfortable using digital devices and communicating via email, and then they're able to go through software prompts and instructions. So I think about this as digital natives, digital curious, people who are kind of interested in technology or comfortable with it just naturally based on their upbringing. But outside of that, comfortable with technology, we have a really diverse set of filers. Like at Prepare and Prosper, we've got people from like age 15 to age 80 that have gone through this process. We've got folks who are coming from all different areas of the country, even though we're based in Minnesota. And we've got folks that are working on it in the middle of the night, folks that work all kinds of different jobs. So very diverse outside of that technology focused piece where people are comfortable with that. And Brendan, I'll pass it to you for the next one.
Yep, and Katie, I have the same experience at My Free Taxes with, filer fit, right? Like half of US files using online software, the other half doesn't, right? That's where traditional VITA and TCE services still have a really significant role to play. What we're trying to do is just reach the half of the population who's likely comfortable and interested in filing using online software, and enable them to do that in the free and safe environment of VITA and TCE. Like you, we also see people filing all times of the night, wide variety of filer types, but yeah, generally people that are comfortable using the internet, maybe an online banking product or applying for a loan online. Those are all really good fits. In terms of centering choice and presenting option up front, we think it's important to do this because it means including both traditional and FSA VITA in all outreach, promotion, and implementation efforts, so that filers can choose the service model that's best for them. Remember, half the people you reach with your outreach efforts may be interested in filing their own taxes using online software, but most, if not all of them, don't know about the availability of FSA VITA unless you tell them. The VITA network's been around for a long time. Those who do know about VITA really think of it as one thing, as traditional in-person VITA, maybe some virtual VITA where it's full service, completing someone's return soup to nuts. It's going to take a lot of effort for us as a network to socialize our communities to understand that VITA means that and more. so that we can reach the filers that are a good fit for FSA VITA. Katie, can you walk us through number 3?
Yeah, so our third point here on our best practices is that we want to redefine the VITA target population. And what we mean by that is that we want to expand our definition of who our VITA target audience is to include everyone who is VITA eligible, not just folks that are interested in or reached by our higher touch traditional VITA. So this could be folks that are living in a rural area, still have internet access. This could be folks that maybe have a little bit higher income than a lot of VITA programs being targeted directly toward low income filers versus that low to moderate income zone. This could be folks that aren't able to come during the specific time that VITA sites are open, not limited by geography. Let's target our entire VITA eligible population because the folks that we target are the folks that we're actually going to reach. And when we think about kind of breaking outside of our, okay, maybe you're a community action agency and you serve a particular county, but maybe you could expand that just a little bit to the counties that are adjacent to you with this FSA option because it's a lighter touch in terms of the amount of effort that your volunteers need to put into this. Or maybe your geography limited based on your physical locations. You can expand that geographical reach and we can reach more VITA eligible filers just by changing the way that we talk about who can reach the services. And Brendan, I will pass it to you to cover this last point on our best practices.
All right, and I did just get a time warning because we do have a lot of questions we want to get to. So Katie, we've been asked to move briskly through the examples on the next slides, just a heads up there. Our final best practice is about the importance of promotion at all levels of government and how that's essential for scale. This helps filers differentiate FSA VITA from the murky landscape of quote unquote free but not really free tax filing options. And it helps VITA TCE programs compete in outreach with commercial providers that have Super Bowl sized advertising budgets. On the next slides, we'll show you some of these best practices in action. And as a teaser for something we'll talk about at the end, all of these best practices are listed in a series of briefs called the VITA Innovation Briefs that TON's putting out later this summer. So you'll get to read more of these in just a couple of months. Katie?
Yeah, and I'll pick up first with this Prepare and Prosper example. And I think that our scheduling page through Prepare and Prosper, this is just kind of a screenshot of what that scheduling page looks like. And it shows how we really present that filer choice at the beginning and at all aspects before someone's scheduling, while someone's scheduling, and say, hey, if you want to do your own taxes, like check out our do-it-yourself tax preparation program, or if there aren't appointments available, give this a try too. I think we can move on to the next example.
Great, and this one comes from Free Taxes El Paso. I just grabbed this screenshot, and it shows how they're centering filer choice and presenting options up front. This is from freetaxeselpaso.org, the intake website for their VITA coalition. The image and option on the left where it says, let us do it for you. If folks choose that option, they get connected to the local in-person VITA services and also some drop-off virtual services provided by the Free Taxes El Paso VITA coalition. However, if someone wants to file their own taxes, they choose the do-it-yourself option on the right in purple. That's a pretty simple referral process. If you click that button, you get directly connected to myfreetaxes.com. That's MyFreeTaxes, the national FSA partner that Free Taxes El Paso has chosen to partner with for this year. And then once folks land on MyFreeTaxes, we take it from there as the MyFreeTaxes VITA team to get people to the right software and provide them support when they need it. And then Free Taxes El Paso can access our data reports to track their impact in their VITA and other grants. Next slide. And this example, it just talks about the importance of government promotion. This screenshot from Oregon.gov webpage is pretty simple. It just promotes tax aid, traditional VITA, and MyFreeTaxes, FSA VITA. There's not a lot of design elements here. It's not really used as part of a broader information campaign. But even with this simple web page, This page regularly places in the top 10 referral sources for how filers get connected to My Free Taxes for FSA VITA, and that's with a nationwide lens. So there's only about like 3 to 4 states or counties that even have a simple web page like this talking about FSA VITA. If your state, county, or city created a similar page, we all as a network would be able to reach a lot more people with news and referrals to FSA VITA. I'm going to pass it back to Katie now for one more poll question.
Yeah, so as we're thinking about next steps, I'm going to have you launch the poll. No, actually, the next step slide is great. But go ahead and launch our next poll, which is just, hey, now that you've listened to us chat about this for quite a while, are you planning to provide FSA VITA in 2024? Maybe you're already going, yes, Katie, I want to do what you did at Prepare and Prosper. I want to do this in-house, kind of start to finish. We've got capacity. Are you thinking about partnering with a national VITA partner like My Free Taxes to incorporate this into your programs? Or are you still unsure? You're like, well, maybe FSA, maybe not quite there yet. Let's see those results and how they're coming in. Oh, kind of a firm mix. Okay, you curious or unsure VITA people, maybe in these next Q&A minutes, we will be able to see how you are, how you're unsure or alleviate some of your curiosity. But we've got a pretty even split with about 30 to 35% in all of the options of offering it in-house, partnering with a national partner, or being unsure. So let's go ahead and skip to our next step slide. And just in terms of next steps, before we get into our Q&A, I want to encourage everyone to discuss FSA with your IRS person, your territory manager, your relationship manager. Get two folks in your IRS partnership to discuss this. Reach out to the Taxpayer Opportunity Network through Prosperity Now to get support. Graham is a great resource, and there are lots of people on within TON that are able to support you. And watch out for that VITA Innovations brief that Brendan was highlighting a few minutes ago. And then also reach out to myself and Brendan if you have additional questions that are going to be specific to your program. And we're ready to move to the next slide, which just has some of our contact information. And then Graham, I think we can jump into questions.
Yeah, let's go for it. All right, so the first question here is, if people are able to file what would normally be out-of-scope returns using FSA, how are VITA volunteers able to help answer questions on those out-of-scope topics?
And Brendan,
Yeah.
I can jump in.
Oh, go ahead, Katie.
Okay, I was going to say I have an immediate answer for this because I do this a lot. There's a fine line between out-of-scope related things that people can prepare. And I just have kind of a stock line that says, like, we're not able to provide direct support related to this tax issue, but there is an IRS publication about this. Here is the information, or there is a tax slayer support article about this, and you can take a look and see how it applies to your situation. So we try and still offer some support, but making it very clear that there's a line for us. And Brendan, I'm curious what your team does.
Yeah, pretty much the same approach, Katie. You know, for folks that are filing a return that includes something that's out of scope, usually 95% of their return is still within scope for VITA. There's just one or two forms or aspect of forms that they're using that would normally prevent them from having their return filed by a volunteer. If they happen to send our VITA support team a question about that specific piece that's out of scope, we'll let them know, hey, our team is certified by the IRS to answer a certain set of questions. This question falls out of what we're specifically trained to answer. However, and so we cannot provide formal or legal tax advice on this question, but here are some resources, whether it's an IRS resource, whether it's a tax layer resource, and you know, I'm not ashamed to admit, even if it's an Intuit blog post, because some of them are really good and there's not alternatives to use that talk about the exact same situation and can walk them through that experience. That's also why at My Free Taxes we created a pretty in-depth Schedule C filing guide, which has a disclaimer right in the beginning that, you know, this is general advice, not tax advice, not legal advice, but it then does walk people through, you know, how to fill out their Schedule C, including if they have more than $20,000 in deductions, which would preclude them from accessing in-person VITA, but need not preclude them from accessing FSA VITA.
Thank you both for answering that. I think it's really important to always remember to have that sense of flexibility to try to bring the services we can within the scope that we're allowed. All right, so the next question is, will the My Free Taxes partner portal be providing updated reports soon?
Yes, hopefully. My IRS spec relationship manager is in Europe, and the FSA reporting process is extremely manual. I can't pull it myself. So when they're back from vacation, the beginning of the second week of May, we'll get updated data reports, and then I can put them on the partner portal. Our cadence this year has been about monthly, which is we like to do bi-weekly. The plus side though is that our data reports this year are much more detailed. We've been asking IRS, spec, and TaxSlayer to give us data reports that break down all data at the zip code level from the tax return. And we don't have some like formal official announcement that we can point to that's going to be provided forevermore. But in the past 3 months, I've gotten one of those reports each month. And so we've started to draw a line and a trend line that shows that if this continues, the My Free Taxes FSA data reports are going to be super accurate down to the zip code level, which is a big boost for our local partners. So if you have questions about that, my email's on the screen, shoot me an email. If you need anything sooner or you need anything that includes a bit more data, I'm always happy to hear from you and work with you on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it's very important for all VITA programs to make sure they can have all the data they can. But just to remind everyone, one thing that they can always report on is that you get credit for the return. So the next question is, where did the $73,000 or $73,000 income limit come from for FSA?
Yeah, so I'll jump in, Katie. You can add your own commentary as well. My understanding is when My Free Taxes in particular became an FSA VITA partner, we were not using a commercial product we were no longer using a commercial product that we got a deal to ensure everyone was able to use for free. We were using a software provided by the IRS. When we took that step, that first year, we more than doubled the total number of FSA VITA returns produced nationwide, just with our one site adding into the pool there. That near exponential growth caused maybe a little bit of consternation, like, oh my gosh, things are changing quickly and not everybody's ready for quick change. And my understanding is that maybe there were conversations with Free File, which has that same income limit, with IRS spec. IRS runs both the VITA program and Free File. And so my understanding is it was conversations within IRS saying, hey, look, if we're providing FSA VITA access to this free filing software, is it free for everyone of any income, or making it better or more expansive than Free File? Or should we make it be, just as expansive as Free File? And where that landed, and that's just my anecdote of sort of reading the tea leaves, but my understanding is that's where that came from. And so the FSA income limit, I'm told, should continue to mirror the upper bound of the income limit for the Free File program. The benefit, though, of FSA VITA is you don't have 10 different softwares with like different forms carved out of them. You have one software with every form that pretty much anyone needs being included there. So it's a much better user experience, in my opinion.
And I do want to actually add one thing to that related to income guidelines for FSA. The 73,000 is what is set up for the software provided by the IRS to VITA sites for FSA use. However, if you pursue your own connection with a different software provider, that income limit might not be what you see. And so this is not something that's strictly regulated by IRS spec. It's something that's set by the software companies. So I just want to throw that out there. If someone partners with a different software company to do their FSA, that limit might be different.
Yep. For example, at My Free Taxes, we ask people, do you earn less than 73K? If they say no, indicating they earn more, we still want to help them access a free tax filing solution. And so we've been piloting the last 2 years, referring people to Cash App Taxes, which is fully free and has no income limit. They don't currently do reporting on SIDNs, so I couldn't say, hey, how many people earned less than 73K that we can include in our VITA grant reports from them, but it still provides a seamless user experience where it's really a no wrong door approach. Folks who come to us, even if they're upper income, we can point them somewhere that is actually truly free to file with no bait and switch opportunities there. So as Katie mentioned, you know, it may be that there's more software entrants in the space that folks can use for FSA. It's 3 o'clock, I see in the chat, but I think we can do one more question, at least on my side.
Yeah, we can fire one more in here. I just wanted to agree with you both and just reinforce that even VITA's income number is not a limit, it's a guideline. And every site does have the discretion to go over that guideline if they have feel the need to do so. So please just remember that it's not a limit, it's a guideline. All right, I think this is a very, very important question and we can end on it. How do you encourage your volunteers to feel like this is a meaningful volunteer opportunity? A lot of our volunteers thrive off of the face-to-face interaction with clients, and obviously in this situation, they wouldn't have that. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I'll jump in first on this and just say that we have volunteers who are so excited about the empowering nature of this work, in teaching people how to do their own return and really focusing on the taxpayer education side of it. And especially in our live Zoom calls, volunteers are getting a really similar interaction with customers that they would in an in-person. And some FSA happens in person, where it's all happening in a room and a volunteer can bop from person to person in a live physical location. And so I think about it as our teachers, the folks that are really into educating taxpayers about their tax situation, helping them navigate and get that buzz of like, oh my gosh, I just helped you do it yourself. That's really the folks that we zeroed in on when we were doing recruitment for this.
Yep, totally concur. One section of the VITA Innovation Brief talks about, you know, finding the right volunteers for the right fit. So, you know, as Katie mentioned, you know, some volunteers really do thrive on providing virtual service delivery, just like some of us thrive on remote work, and some of us don't, right? And so being upfront about what the volunteer opportunities are is a key component. And then, you know, one thing that we also do is slot people into different roles. If someone doesn't need that face-to-face interaction, they can become an email warrior or a live chat warrior and just send response after response after response. If someone wants that face-to-face interaction, they can do live Zoom call support, or they can do sort of a QA check for a filer at the end. So there's a wide variety of ways that we can align service styles within FSA to fit with what volunteers are looking for.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate that. All right, so just very quickly, I know it's past 3 o'clock, so we want you all to be able to get out of here and get back to your day jobs. So next steps, visit our advocacy center to stay up to date with all of our advocacy efforts. Stay tuned for our other Prosperity Summit Encore webinars. They'll be going on for quite some time. And you can plug into the Prosperity Now community. Sign up for our listserv, the Taxpayer Tax Roundtable listserv. Many of you, I'm sure, are on that already. Join one of our working groups. You can volunteer to facilitate peer discussions or serve in a leadership role in any of those working groups. And we're moving right along to keep in mind on September 4th through September 6th, 2024 in Washington, D.C. will be the Prosperity Summit 2024. So again, we hope to see you there in Washington, D.C. And just for some of you folks, we hope to see you in September of 2023 for the VITACon. The VITACon conference, we should all be getting a save the date soon, within the next week. All right, thank you, and please remember to fill out the survey. Have a good one.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.